Right, let's see. So we've got a bunch of events. That's nice. We have user info that we need to keep track of. You know, how much you've staked. The reward debt is also just a calculation helper that I took across from MasterChef. And then whether you've been paid a bonus for a crossover. The constant terror, as in trillion, is just to help with fixed point arithmetic. And you can see that the rectangle of fairness, I've set it at 30. I know you heard me say 25, and now you're thinking, why is it 30? The dynamics of an AMM like Uniswap, as well as the fact that scarcity burns on transfer, means that there's a lot of slipping through the cracks along the way of scarcity, so that even at 30 we're still not really inflating, we're not diluting the value of scarcity. So that's just a number that I needed to figure out. This was a theoretical calculation. So the user John, I don't know if he's still active in the community, but he's been very helpful in figuring out that sort of deep theory. Okay, so we're setting the crossing config, which is just the crossing config. Okay, now we've got a convoluted mapping. So we have a mapping of address to sols. So that would be, in other words, a token address to the struct that tells us about all the staking parameters around that token. But we've now indirectly mapped it to an integer mapping to sol. So in other words, for every token we have an indexed, basically an array of sols. The only reason I've used mapping is because of the indexing feature of mapping versus array. So what this means is that the same token can be listed multiple times on Limbo. Not at the same time, but successively. So what we could do, for instance, is we list a token that we like. Let's say, we're going to do this a lot with LP tokens, I know. So let's say we've got scarcity, I don't know, which one haven't we listed yet? I think we haven't listed, okay, here's one, IF. We haven't listed the LP token IF on Behodler. So first we'll add it as a migration, as a threshold sol. We'll raise the sufficient capital, we'll migrate it across, we'll close that horrible pull together competition, and then now it'll be trading on Behodler. We can then list it again on Limbo, but this time it's just a perpetual sol, so it's just there for lockup incentives now, just to boost the liquidity of I and the price of I. And then perhaps after listing it as a perpetual sol, we disable it. But then in the future we want to list it again, so that's where this mapping of int comes in. We can just keep iterating over listings. Maybe we find that we delist a token because its market cap falls too much to be worthwhile to be listed on Behodler. But then something happens in their team, and the token takes off and it becomes a great success story, and then we decide we want it back on Limbo. So that this mapping of int to sol gives us that flexibility. Because we're not using array, we're using a mapping, we just need to keep track of the indexes per token. So that's this latest index calculation. Same thing for a user. So you can see in the comments I've said it maps as the token to the user to the sol, to the current sol index to the user. So in other words, on a given staking sol for a given index, we've got user info about stuff staked there. So that means the reason we want to do this is because, like, when a sol is done staking and we no longer have any use for it, we don't necessarily know that the user has claimed their flan bonus, or that they or perhaps that they want to unstake their token. So like, for instance, a perpetual token, if we decide to kick it off of Limbo, we want to give users the chance to unstake even if we're turning off flan rewards. So we would kick the sol into calibration state, and then users can unstake whenever they're ready. But we've got to keep track of that information perpetually, because otherwise users will lose money. Someone who's hodling in Limbo and forgets about their address. What else have we got? This token crossing parameters. So for every token listed on Limbo, we have crossing parameters about, the threshold and that sort of thing. There's an approval mechanism. You can approve third parties to unstake on your behalf, and the purpose behind this is just so that if we ever want to upgrade Limbo to Limbo 3, Limbo 3, if we ever want to upgrade to Limbo 2, then we can write some sort of migration contract that users can give permission to, and on a per user basis they can choose to upgrade. And we don't have to worry about the nightmares behind that. If you ask when Limbo 2, you will be kicked from the Discord and Telegram. Flan, we're just keeping track of Flan because we do stuff to Flan. Protocol enabled, we just got a variable called protocol enabled, and this is so that if an emergency occurs in Limbo, we need to temporarily disable it, so that we can stem the losses. We do that through Flash governance. So protocol enabled will just, this modifier will just make sure that critical functions like stake are disabled when we disable. Okay, this one's quite a complex one, and it really requires an understanding of the Uniswap helper or the AMM helper. But essentially what it's doing is it says for a given token, if you want a particular APY on the total amount of that token staked, and you know what the dollar threshold is for that token. So this is for crossover, this is for threshold tokens now. If you know what APY you want and you know what the dollar value of the threshold is, we can use that information to inspect our oracle and report back to you a flan per second variable. So this FPS over here. In other words, we can convert your desired APY into a specific flan per second number, and then we set the sol that you're referring to have that flan per second. So it's quite difficult. I mean, if the community had to do this themselves, there'd be quite a lot of there would need to be some nice front-end code written, and there would need to be calculations done and all of that. So this just on a smart contract level does all of that heavy lifting for you, so that we can just say, look, I want to set the APY to, the minimum APY to 100% or whatever. So you just say 100%, the crossover value is $10,000, and then under the hood, Limbo will figure out what your flan per second needs to be in order to achieve that APY, and it will set it. So I guess that wasn't so complicated. Then I'll try to revert from shouting into the microphone too much, but this isn't a stitched together or edited video stream. YouTubing isn't my profession, so excuse the ums. Update sol will be okay. So this is the I'm aware of all the ums. Update sol is the calculation updater. Remember that on a blockchain, you can't execute scripts to run. What you've got to do is every time something happens, you've got to call a bunch of update functions to create the facade of real-time updates. Like for instance, if you have interest accumulating on Ethereum, it doesn't actually accumulate until some update function is called. But on the front end, you want to have that you want to have that APY number and numbers streaming in like you see in Invictus style with that number ticking over and all of that. So the update sol just keeps the sol up to date based on the current timestamp and so on.